All right, let's tackle one of the biggest questions out there. What exactly is consciousness? For a long time, it seemed like the answer was pretty simple. It's all the stuff happening inside our heads. But what if that's only half the story?
I mean, think about it for a second. Your experience right now, the way you're hearing my voice, the feeling of the chair you're in, is all of that just a big electrical light show inside your skull? Or is there something more going on? That's the big question we're going to unpack today. So let's start with one of the leading ideas, which we can call the inside-out view. The theory here is that consciousness doesn't really start by looking out at the world. Nope. It starts by looking inward at what's happening inside our own bodies. And the magic word here is interoception. It's this constant, quiet process where your brain is monitoring everything happening on the inside. Your heartbeat, your breathing, if you're hungry. Folks like the neuroscientist Anil Seth argue that this is the bedrock of consciousness. It's that fundamental feeling of being alive, of being an organism just trying to keep itself going. So this really sets up the central debate, right? On one side, you have the internal monitor view, saying consciousness is all about keeping the body in balance. But then the critique comes in, and it's a pretty powerful one. Aren't we usually conscious of the world? I mean, you're not sitting there feeling your liver do its thing, but you are definitely aware of that car barreling down the street at you.
Okay, so this brings us to a world-sized problem for this purely internal view. If consciousness is all about what's going on inside, then what happens if we just take away the outside world completely? Does our consciousness just hum along business as usual?
And you know what? We've actually tested this. When you put people in sensory deprivation tanks, totally cut off from sight, sound, and touch, they don't just sit there peacefully feeling their own heartbeat. Not at all. Their consciousness basically starts to fall apart. They start to hallucinate. Their very sense of who they are begins to dissolve. It really seems like without a world to push against, our consciousness kind of loses its grip.
All right, I know what you're thinking. Hold on, what about dreams? Every single night, we shut our eyes, we block out the world, and yet we have these incredibly rich, vivid, conscious experiences. So what's up with that? And here's the kicker. Even when the brain is cut off from the real world, it doesn't just stop interacting with a world. It creates a virtual one. This is so important. It tells us that interacting with a world, whether it's real or simulated, is so fundamental to how the brain works that it will literally make one up from scratch if it means to. So what's the alternative model then? Well, it's this idea called active inference. And the big shift here is thinking of the brain not as some passive computer just predicting what's going to happen next. No, it's an action machine. It's constantly out there doing things to make its predictions about the world actually come true. Let's use a super simple example, being hungry. Your brain doesn't just passively notice your blood sugar is low. It starts with a prediction, something like, my body should have enough energy. When it senses that's not true, bam, that's a prediction error. That error signal is what drives you to act in the world, to get up, go to the fridge, and find some food. You change the world to make your prediction come true. Consciousness is the feeling of that entire process unfolding. And this quote from Carl Friston, who's a huge name in this area, just sums it all up perfectly. The brain isn't just predicting things. It's realizing those predictions by getting out there and taking action. Perception isn't just about passively receiving information, it's about actively changing the world to match what we expect.
So where are we now? The point here isn't to just throw out that whole inside view. It's actually much cooler than that. We're building a more complete model, one where the self and the world are in this constant dance, totally inseparable partners in the creation of consciousness.
Think about the classic brain in a vat thought experiment. It makes the difference crystal clear. The old inside-out view might say, sure, maybe some basic flicker of consciousness could still exist, but this new world interactive view makes a much starker prediction. Consciousness would basically be gone. And, this lines up with what we see in the real world with patients in vegetative states. Their internal body functions can be chugging along, but without that interaction with the world, consciousness just fades away. And all of this leads us to a much more elegant, integrated model. Consciousness isn't a thing that's just in your brain, and it's not just out there in the world. It emerges from the loop, from the dynamic, constant interaction between your brain's model of the world and the world itself. Okay, so this isn't just some abstract philosophical argument, right? This has huge implications for maybe the biggest question of our time, artificial intelligence. Could we ever build a machine that is truly, genuinely conscious? When you ask, can AI be conscious? These two models give you wildly different answers.
The old inside-out view's argument that an AI can't be conscious because it has no body is actually kind of weak. I mean, we could just build it a robot body with sensors, right? Problem solved. But the world interactive view offers a much tougher challenge. It says an AI can't be conscious because it doesn't actually live in the world. It has no skin in the game, no real need to preserve itself. It doesn't have a world to lose. Which brings us to our final, kind of mind-bending takeaway. Maybe the great secret of consciousness isn't some property of the brain we just haven't found yet. Maybe consciousness isn't about having a brain at all. Maybe it's about having a world.